Hi guys, welcome back to the Academy of Historical Fencing. I'm Nick Thomas. I'm bringing you a lesson on Pringle Green's defensive works. Now, why? I've mostly been working on Roworth recently, and entirely in fact, and Pringle Green is a naval manual published in, well, it wasn't actually published, it was a notebook effectively in 1812 by a Canadian, so in the Royal Navy, and provides a fascinating insight into naval combat of the period. So it's really quite a unique manual. We've been working on it, we did 2 months at the HF working on it. So that's one reason to talk about it, but the other is Pringle Green offers a really simple strategy for defensive actions. So if we go back to Roworth and Angelo, there are 9 guards to work through, and a guard is what's used to stand in a fight and also to parry the attacks that are coming in against you. If you go to Pringle Green, there are 3 guards. So it's a hugely simplified strategy of defense, and the reason for that is that Pringle Green's manual is intended to teach people to fight within a few hours of training, and that includes all the group combat, the discipline, the structure, everything that had to go with it. So individual sword combat training was hugely limited. So he had to develop a way that you could learn as a body of troops to fight effectively very quickly. And for that reason, 3 guards, and they're all related. They're all a form of hanging guard. One is the Guard of St. George, which isn't technically a hanging guard, but it's related. And we move between hanging guard options as a means of defense. So it's interesting from the perspective that it's contemporary of Roworth anyway, and it's British military swordsmanship. But it's also fascinating that if you are, say, a beginner or new to this particular weapon, and you want a simple and effective defense strategy that you can learn in a matter of minutes, and then you can progress on to the more complex defensive actions of Roworth and Angelo, this is a great place to start. And the reason is not just the number of guards, but it's the position of the hilt. So normally in our defensive actions, we can parry where the hilt's low and the hilt high. And people tend to fumble and get confused about which one to use and when. And they end up basically sort of hunting for which one to use. And that can expose them to all sorts of strikes. Pringle Green really simplifies it by only using hanging positions. And he says that the defensive actions are from this hanger position here, which we call inside half hanger in Roworth, to this one, which is outside half hanger in Roworth, and this one, which is God of St. George. And Pringle Green doesn't even give them names. He just says that there's a cut from high, a cut from left, and a cut from the right, and these are the ways to parry it. Now, he does say that untrained swordsmen tends to just or only strike from high. And that's not so surprising. So this would be a cut 7 in Angelo. In Roworth, it would be a 1 or 2, depending on quite the angle of it, because he doesn't have an exactly straight down vertical blow. And it's not so surprising that people that aren't trained are inclined to just whack, basically. So that makes some sense. And he does say that, yeah, if you fight an untrained swordsman, that's what you're going to be encountering. But then he also throws in the cut, this would be 6, and cut 5. Which would normally be aimed at the flanks, flank and belly, which could also be aimed at the head. So you've got your 3 attacks. So you cut from high, cut from the right, cut from the left. And then he just has a very simple strategy of how to defend against those things. And I just showed it to you. It's a hanging position from the left, hanging position from the right, Guard of St. George. And that is it. And you can see the beauty of this system is you're not having to mess around and basically calculate where the hilt should be. Should it be high? Should it be low? And which one do we want to use? No, you just stay with the hilt high, and we move from these 3 positions. It's really nice and simple. Now, there may also have been another reason that he did that. I think it might be twofold. Is that, yes, it's simple and quick to learn. It doesn't confuse people, which is good. But also, this is designed as naval combat. So it is designed to be used on the land as well. But of course, his main concern is onboard ships. And ships are cramped. Even the largest ships, you're going to have large crews. I mean, a warship at that time, you're usually talking about 250 up to 850 crew for the first-rate stuff. So you're talking about a lot of crew. Marines and supernumeraries as well, which are people not attached to the, or not basically employed by the ship, but working on the ship at the time. And it's going to be cramped. You've got rigging everywhere, masts, guns, all sorts of confusion and all sorts of obstacles. And if you're having to basically flip like this, there's a lot of motion and a lot of room needed to do that, as well as the fact that you might be dealing with pikes and bayonets, well, you likely will be. So if you use this simplified system of hanging guard, a hanging guard is where the tip is below the hilt. So you use this, this, and this. There are no big arcs or rotational movements that would get in the way and basically interfere with everything around you. So that makes a lot of sense as well. So it's good for confined spaces, and of course that'll be below deck as well. Plenty of obstacles down there. So it's good in confined spaces, but it's also just a fantastic method for people who learn very quickly and learn to be able to defend themselves very, very quickly. And if the attacks come in at different heights, you can simply adjust the height. Now, St. George is just for the downright blow to the head, so you don't need to adjust that at all. But your hanging guard positions, if the attack, say, came in a little bit high and was coming towards the hilt area and just above, you can just lift a little bit. And that would actually make it a full hanging guard, because the difference between a full hanging guard and a half hanging guard is, do you cover the head or not? So a hanging guard, I would be able to see you underneath in the inside hanging guard. Whereas if I went down to inside half hanger, I'd be looking over the top of my arm. So if you lifted, you would be going into a full hanging guard. But Pringle Green is not bothered about that. He doesn't even have names for the different guards. It's just, this is parrying or protecting on the left side, protecting right side, protect the head. Really nice and simple. And that is as simple as it is. And of course, with your hanging guard positions, they work really well for moving into cuts 1 or cut 7, either way from here. And of course, St. George, they transition really well into high cuts, which you're going to want to use a lot. There's one last thing that has to be mentioned about defense, and that is thrust work. Because, of course, yes, cuts from high and cuts from right and left basically do cover all the standard cuts that are going to come against you. But what about thrust work? Simply put, you've already done it. The motion from here to here, this will parry the thrusts. And this is shown in Pringle Green when he talks about fighting against bayonets and pikes. Pikes in this sense would be naval boarding pikes, so that's a spear, sort of 7 to 9 foot normally. And there you go. So you've got defense against attacks from the high, from either side, and from thrusts, all sorted, and that's all you had to do. So you can see it's a really, really simple method, and it is effective. Now, of course, this simple means that it doesn't have massive options in terms of riposting, but it has enough. It'll teach you to be able to defend yourself and hold, basically hold your own in a fight very, very quickly. So if you want to practice this one at home, it's really nice and easy. So we just start in one of the hanging positions and move to the other, because that's likely where they're going to attack. So if you're in this one, they're probably going to attack here. If you're in this one, they're probably going to attack here. And then at any time, go into guard of St. George. So you'll see the angles here is in the half hanging position. The tip is pointing towards the floor and the hand is at roughly the shoulder height. And we move it over. So this is what we'd call outside half hanging in Roworth. This is inside half hanging in Roworth. And this would be guard of St. George. And notice you do bring the tip back. So guard of St. George is not a hanging guard with the tip forward. The tip comes back. Okay, so you can see the flat of your blade with guard of St. George. That is the method, according to Pringle Green. He has one page on swordsmanship, because ultimately the main purpose of training a naval crew is discipline and structure in group combat. Individual training or individual skill with a sword is not hugely important. Better, and in fact he does say it in the manual, is just to teach these simple methods and then have them fight each other as a bit of a sport, to keep them basically familiar and fast with the techniques, and that's as simple as it is. So there were no complex methods at the time for training the ship's crews. As far as we know, it's certainly not documented until a bit later. And there you go. So there's Pringle Green. Now I will get on to very soon, in the next few days, doing a video on the guards from Roworth and Angelo. There are 9. It's more complicated. There's more to say, a lot more to say. But if you want a simple framework in defense, work from this one and then build on to the Roworth Angelo stuff, because that works really, really well. And I will also make a separate video on using the pistol defensively, because Pringle Green does really love using the pistol defensively, as in running it down the left arm and using it to actually parry cuts. So I'll make a separate video on that entirely, because you want a separate video on that one. So there you go. Really nice and simple. Go from your guard positions of the half hanging position, go up into guard of St. George, and when you're happy with that, make your parry and deliver a cut. Make your parry, deliver a cut, and from this one over here, make a cut. And you can then throw some lunging in. Now, Pringle Green doesn't mention any footwork at all, so it doesn't show a slip, doesn't really kind of shows the lunge, I suppose. It doesn't mention it. It's again, it's very, very simple, but we want to throw that in because it's the standard method at the time. So from here, start in your outside half hanging position, move to inside, and then lunge with your riposte. Half hanging position, move to inside, riposte. And then from here, go to inside guard, guard of St. George, riposte. And you can also then, from here, start your half hanging position, go to guard of St. George, and thrust with a response. Because the thrust work is really, really good and you should be doing it more anyway. And I'll make a video on that quite soon as well, because people should be thrusting more with military swords. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Pringle Green is a fascinating manual. You can get it freely on our website. We transcribed it, tidied the artwork up, and it's a really cool piece to work through. Again, there's not much about individual combat in there, but there's a lot on melee tactics, strategies, and how to board and things like that. Really, really good stuff. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't subscribed, please do so.